Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I am going to set up to okay, sorry for the delay. That's all of it. It's just because I'm trying to scan to YouTube, and the most of the things I had to do is to verify that I am me, just to do it. All right, let me share my screen. If I can find that. Where is share screen option? Share screen. Must be here somewhere. Here we go, share screen. Share screen. And now let's find it. Let's find it was here somewhere, so this might be it. I just think giving me such a warm time now. Too many devices. This is what it is. Here, I sit here. But I had opened it before. Yes, this is it. All right, it's good enough. All right, guys, this is the presentation that was done 2 weeks ago. So major project, this is what's already delivered. Going to introduce the major project, talk about the deliverables and the deadlines, the supervisory process, and a little bit about academic writing if we have time. And there was a list of basically resources from an academic point of view, like there's scholarly literature. So for this, as you may or may not know, the search is really just taking what you're curious about and poking and prying with a purpose. So PRJ 4020 is a 3-credit course that's required for most of the undergraduate degrees in SCIT. The registration takes place in either semester 1 or 2. The prerequisite is RES 3024 or its equivalent. It's a 1-year project to be completed over 2 semesters, and the topic can either be one that is from a supervisor, that's typically a full-time lecturer in SCIT, or from the students, but it must meet the criteria listed below. That is, the project must be one that employs good research questions, and it must have methods that will be able to answer the research questions. A good method is what is called robust. It must be feasible, and you have options between research only, research and mini development, and research and major development. There must be a supervisor or one or more than one that agrees to supervise the project. You can't do a project without a supervisor. There must be the approval of the Faculty Ethics Committee before you start that data collection. And if at some point there is a panel or person that is in charge saying that there needs to be major changes, then you need to make those changes before the pass. I mean, as at all stages. If you take last academic year, there was a group, for example, that there were several groups that did not pass the major project final viva that actually did it a second time. And there was at least one group that did not pass the second final viva. I should explain what that is. And what actually really happened was the supervisor was not happy with the written project, and they actually had to make some significant upgrades in the written project before they could pass. I think most groups last year passed. There was 1 or 2 problems, but most people by the end of a very tasking process did pass the project. All right. Just making sure everybody can hear me, right? Without a problem?
Yes, Sam.
Just making sure. All right. right, so the application process, for those who came in late, I'm doing this again because apparently there's some miscommunication. The meeting is to start at 3, but we started at 3:30, but the new part will start at 4. So this is just a repeat of what happened 2 weeks ago. So the application process is essentially, there is the application to the major project supervisor, him or herself. But in terms of the coordinators, and this semester, Mr. Philip Smith is a coordinator for BSc Computer Information Systems and BSc Computer Network and Security. And Arlene Primrose Whitaker is the coordinator for BSc Computing, and I will be this coordinator for that BSc Computing in semester 2. That's just where things are right now. So after you get, well, this means there is actually a form where everybody should fill out right now, no matter what. But as soon as you actually get approval, the coordinator needs to know who is your supervisor. And in the past, we might actually need to have another form. There was a formal way that we would know that the supervisor had given permission for the approval of this project. So we need something that we're going to be sure that these are the final projects going forward. At any rate, the idea is we want people to apply for their major projects. If we could get everybody to have a topic and a group in September, that would be the best case scenario. But the very latest by November of this year, right? It's a 1-year project. And the idea is that in May, when you have presentations, you'll be ready. And you can only be ready if you work on it all the way throughout the academic year. So the role of the major project coordinator includes the following: is to be the key contact person about students' major project applications, mediator between the supervisor and the students, organizes the mini Viva and the final Viva, organize contests. So we have contests for, in the past, we had for best poster. And going forward, we now have contests for best artifact, that's best prototype, and best paper. And there may be a cash prize, but more on that. That's a bit early in the year for this. And then you also need to know that all projects, okay, so if you've done research methods, and if you haven't, you should know that all major projects at UTech must be approved through the faculty's ethics process, as I mentioned earlier. There's a website that the last 2 coordinators used. There's a new person this year, is on the screen, Dr. Balvin Thorpe. I'm assuming that he's using the same ethics application. We're hoping at the next meeting, we will invite him to come and give a presentation. At any rate, part of the process is to apply for ethics. And you're not permitted to collect data until you get the ethics approval. There's actually a certificate which you get electronically, which is to be included in your final documentation, but you don't need to get the certificate before you collect it. You just need to get an email that says you've gotten approval, and you get the certificate in time. The people to contact are Shadi Yuan, who works in SCIT, and she's an admin support in SCIT. And Dr. Balvin Thorpe, he happens to be an engineer who is the current chair of the ethics application. So the deliverables for major projects. So as I said, there's an application process. Basically, the sooner the better. We're going to have a number of training sessions for students. We're suggesting that applications for ethics be between October to February. And I put a big star there because if by some terrible scenario, for some reason, okay, let me back up. Forget the terrible scenario. Is it certainly possible that you apply for ethics and there are several reasons why it may not be a yes the first time? The application is not clear. So the committee is not able to understand the intent of your project. And so they ask for clarification by email. Another reason is you don't submit the required component. So it's required that you put the instrument. So if you decide you're doing an interview or a survey, but you don't add it to your application form, it's going to be rejected outright. And they say, please supply these instruments. You know, whatever is required, you have to put it. So it could be that there may be more than one time that the application is reviewed. At the end of it, when we say to February, it really should be as early as possible. But if it is that you are able to get an application done in March and still collect data and complete the project by May, we're not stopping you. So just giving this because I've had this in the past, and then people said, but they saw February, and so they thought they couldn't give it in. The ethics committee meets all year round, apart from I think twice a year they don't meet. And if there's an emergency, they could be possibilities to meet. One more thing about the ethics application committee, they don't meet the day you send in the application. So you expect that there will be a time lag between the application and the review, right? Okay, guys. Anyway, so then you're going to be working on your lit review. So remember, the application essentially is what equivalent of what you did call chapter 1 or the first assignment for research methods. You'll definitely be working on the lit review draft and chapters 1 to 3. Now, I have as a caveat that it's a possibility that you'll be able to submit your application before you submit all of chapters 2. Once it is that, because the application form itself basically asks for information like the title of the project, the aim and objective, the methods of the project, the ways in which persons could be affected, you know, in terms of harm, possible harm to participants, what is the informed consent process like, etc., etc. There are a number of questions asked. And currently, the application doesn't ask for lit review. So if it doesn't ask for a lit review, then it's possible to submit the ethics form before you actually have a full formed lit review. So I'm just suggesting that you do ethics as soon as is possible. You are expected/required to get your supervisor to review your ethics form and should have signed off on it. So there's a place for student signature and supervisor signature on the ethics application, and that should take place. So you will be working on your chapters 1 to 3. So we all know chapters 1 is an introductory chapter, which involves the background, problem statement, research questions, purpose, significance, methods, etc. Right? Yes. And the chapter 2 is literature review, which will vary from project to project as to what's going to be in it. And chapter 3 is, remember, you all learned this in research methods. So only person who would know what this is, people who haven't done research methods as yet. And chapter 3 is the methods chapter. So chapter 3 has everything from the type of research design, which includes whether it's qualitative or quantitative. It will have things like what is the population and the sample size. It will have things like the instruments to be used. It will have the ethical consideration, the data analysis plan. It will have a, it really should have a schedule. It could have a budget, but that's optional. And it would have methodological considerations, you know, and limitations. All of those kinds of things are the things. I don't know if I missed out one, this is on my head. Those are the things that you have in chapter 3. Basically the same things you learned in research methods. If you're going to do a project that includes a prototype or artifact, you should be looking to have a draft of it as early as possible. By the way, in the Miniviva, you don't, it's not expected to present that prototype. It's not a requirement. So I'm just saying right now. And then you'll be preparing for your Miniviva. We actually have a proposed date of Thursday, January 5th, which is before the semester begins. so that we won't have any problem with any clashes with classes and any clashes with the panelists will be able to be there. So that's a plan. And then in terms of the mini Viva, we want it be a graded assignment. So the dates will be announced and there will be a schedule and pretty much people will be, I'm not sure at this time whether that will be online or face-to-face, given that we're still at the end, the tail end, I hope, of a pandemic. Hopefully by then the pandemic will have ended and we can then just decide for practicality if we want the mini Viva to be online or not. But I'm suspecting that the final Viva this year coming up might be face-to-face, but I'm not predicting. I'm just speculating right now. It is a oral examination. So if your project has an artifact, you will be working on a prototype on chapter 4. So remember, after you get ethics approval, you will do some data collection, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or both. You would write up your chapter 4, which is your analysis and findings chapter. And you would obviously also be working on your chapter 5, which I don't see here like listed. So I guess I could have had a date for that. But somewhere between March 31st and the final Viva, you would obviously have a full final draft of chapters 1 to 5. Chapter 1 being introduction, chapter 2 being literature review, chapter 3 being methods and procedures, chapter 4 being analysis and findings. People have different terms for these chapters. Chapter 5, I like to call conclusion and recommendations. So the tentative date for the final Viva, so both the mini Viva and the final Viva are oral presentations in front of a panel of judges that are sure to include the lecturers in SCIT and could include outsiders that would have to be announced. And then you would submit the project to your supervisor, typically anywhere between 1 week to 2 weeks after. That's why I've given a whole long time here. So you submit it to your supervisor because right now it's tentatively June 1st. And then the supervisor must submit grades into UTech. And then there'd be a competition later on. I had some proposed dates, but no specific dates. And unfortunately, typically every year for many years now, there have been people who groups that do not pass their Viva the first time around. And so we have a resit. And that's typically in the summer at a date to be announced. And so people who do the Viva would then, after they pass the Viva, would then submit the project. And by the project, we mean chapters 1 to 5. All right. Hopefully I'm being clear so far. Why this notification won't go away. See, it doesn't let me. How hard is it to get this off the screen? Maybe I should just move on. Don't know why it's not. This is not working. Anyway, so the supervisory process. Is it not going ahead? What am I doing wrong, guys? Finally, it goes ahead. All right. So the requirements of the supervisor. So the supervisor is expected to meet. So based on the UTech contract with the supervisors, at least twice with the students per semester. As in everything more than that is bonus. Now, usually I meet with my students way more often than that. They're to review and sign the ethics form before it's actually submitted to the committee. They're to give feedback to students in a timely fashion. They're to assist with preparing the students for the mini and the final Viva. And then there's grading. So the project has a proposal. So that proposal is equivalent to chapter 1. There is a continuous assessment. So each person in the group is evaluated, and that is participation and individual effort in the major project. And then chapters 1 to 5, which is 50% of your overall grade. is the quality of contribution for each member, and that's not necessarily identical. So continuous assessment is for participation and effort, and chapters 1 to 5 grade is for quality of contribution for each person. Not the same thing. There's one more grade, this is the Viva. So if you look at it, 5 and 15, that's 20. So the Viva is 30%. So the panel grades you for 30% between the mini Viva and the final Viva, and the supervisor grades the group 70% for proposal, continuous assessment, and the final project, which is chapters 1 to 5. Their requirements for students. So every student must contribute to each component of the major project. So there should be some documentation of the individual contribution. You should interact with other group members, including giving feedback and written evaluation. Obviously, each individual student should not plagiarize. One way to check that is to use Turnitin software that UTEC subscribes to. So you can use that in advance for you to check whether yourself and other group members are not in line with the requirements. You're required to participate in oral presentations, and we just said earlier that there are 2 types of presentations, the mini Viva and the final Viva. You're required to attend meetings with the supervisor to be open to advice and feedback. And it is best practice to create meeting notes. So it's required to have notes of the meeting with the supervisor. Remember, it's only 4 per whole academic year, which is required. Everything else is bonus. And we suggest that you have meetings with students, whether through face-to-face or any other online feature that you care to use. So this is a repetition of the previous slide, just for emphasis. Every student must be involved in every part. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody knows every part equally, but it cannot be that the analysis you did nothing for. That is not okay. Cannot be that chapter 1, you have no idea what's about. Oh, that wasn't my part, miss or sir. No, you must know about and contribute to some degree. It don't have to be equally. It's a group project where you must know something about every part and be meaningfully part of. Meaning you can, like, you're not a coder, you look at the thing and say, but let's test it. You can do testing, you can do feedback on the user interface. It's not like, oh, that is not my part. No, that is not how it works, guys. You should attend meetings with supervisor. You should, if you can't attend the meetings, you tell the person that you're sick or you're at work. There was a big issue with one particular supervisor, maybe there are others too, that the supervisor said this is the student and they don't hear from the student. The student just thinks, oh, they can understand, oh, they're busy at work and they can't turn up and not saying what they're doing and whatever they're interacting with other students, that's good enough. No, you're required to interact with the supervisor. So if you can't come to meetings, you must be emailing the supervisor directly and interacting. It's a requirement. You must interact with other students in the major project group throughout the entire academic year. You can't just say, oh, the first 2 months or the last 2 months is when I decided I'm going to show up. That's not okay. You should give feedback to other group members. You can edit their writing. You can suggest changes to code. You can suggest modifications in design, etc., etc., etc. I have yet to see a perfect project, so the amount of opportunity to give feedback is numerous. You are expected, unless it is that the supervisor is sure that everybody was very involved in everything, which does happen sometimes. We are requiring that you submit an evaluation of each student's contribution, including yourself, to the supervisor. And you should, as we said already, you should participate in both oral presentations. We call them the mini Viva and the final Viva. So we're not have time to go through this, but this is just, in a sense, a repeat of what you learned in research methods class. So you know that, so translation is this introductory chapter is what we're calling a proposal in this context. So what I was saying earlier to somebody who asked is that before we're recording, is that the in the initial, you may choose to have a verbal or written interaction with a supervisor to say, this is a topic that we're proposing, or sir, we heard that you have interest in this area. Can we do a project with you on this? You know, you may have that kind of discussion before you actually write the whole proposal. But the point is the proposal will have most of this. The only part I would say is not necessary as a first draft is you probably don't need delimitations and definition of terms as your first draft. But a good proposal would have the background, the problem statement, the purpose, the research questions, the significance, and even a short methods. Not the whole methods chapter, but just like simply, what is the research design? By research design, I mean, is it quantitative, qualitative, multiple or mixed methods? Hopefully you know what those words mean. I can qualify shortly. You're going to also discuss the population. Remember, the population is if it's a project that includes people or even non-people data. What's the population? Is it computers? Is it students? That's the population. But the sample is the actual number you're going to actually collect data from. So you should say the size of your population. You should tell us what the population is, the size of the population, and the size of the sample. And then the sampling technique, all that should be discussed. So research design should be discussed. So I'm not even the short thing, quick. What's your research design? Quickly. Maybe it's a quantitative project that uses experimental design. Maybe it's a qualitative project that uses only interviews. That is actually research design. What is sampling? So you're going to talk very quickly. The thing is, so that's done at a university, and the population is faculty, academic staff, and students. And we're going to be doing surveys of 50 staff and 200 students, something like that. That's quick, that don't take a lot of space. You're going to be saying for the third important part of the methods, you'll be talking about the instruments. So if it's going to be like, since I just said a university project, it could be that we're doing a 10-item survey for the staff and a 20-item survey that is modified from this particular instrument used in this particular study in the past. All right. Admit these people into the room. All right. So delimitations, just as a reminder, is just the things that your study will not focus on. So like if you're doing a study about Jamaican universities, you may choose to be looking at this urban universities, for example. That would be a delimitation. So what you're not going to look at. Definition of terms is basically just be defining the terms that are typically in the research questions or in the problem statement that are key to the project in a precise way. So if you're talking about adolescents, like the World Health Organization defines adolescents as 10 to, sorry, I'm saying the wrong thing. I think it's 13 to 19. But the point is that adolescent 10 to 19? Is it 13 to 19? What is it? The point is you have to say, if you even want to say a student, what's a student? All of these things, if you even want to look at academic performance, is your academic performance the grades and exams, or is it, what is it? Everything you have to define precisely. And the references, as you know, in writing this up, you're going to have your citations throughout, and we use APA in SCIT, the American Psychological Association Style Guide. So you're going to have the citations through the background problem statement. So those two sections, purpose, research questions, significance, typically doesn't have citations. And you're going to have citations through those two sections, and then you will have a list of references at the end, according to the APA standard. And then, why is this not moving forward? There. So you want to reduce plagiarism, cite all reference authors. So all the citations should be in the reference list, as you know. The reference list should include all citations. You're going to paraphrase all expressions of authors. Where possible, you're going to have very few like direct quotes. So in order to paraphrase, things you can do, you use synonyms, you use inversion, you use a different sentence structure. You can read about how to do that. This is not the time for that. You can add your own remarks when you're referring to other people's ideas. You can run a plagiarism test, like we just mentioned before. That is Turnitin software that UTech is subscribed to. All right. Let's not talk about this. So you know that by the end of your entire project, you're going to have an abstract. So you don't need an abstract when you're doing your proposal unless you really want to. That was just completely not required at this time. But you also know that abstract is a summary of the project. So you can write an abstract of your you definitely need an abstract by the end of the project, right? So abstract at the proposal stage is premature, but if you can do it well, go ahead, but not required at that time. So I have an example of a abstract here that's taken from a study, leave it alone. You're going to, oops. Okay. I had, did I not, can, Mr. Smith, could you please letting people into the room? Because I think, didn't I make you a co-host? I think I had. I think I made Mr. Smith and Mr. Whitaker, Miss Whitaker co-host. Right, so there's some articles here. So this particular slideshow should be available to you already, or if not, it will be made available to you. Keep having problems with this laptop. Yes, all right. Right, so you can find some material about writing abstracts. And lit review. There is no formula for a lit review, except that you always need an introductory and a summary. And in your summary, you should be telling the reader about the gap in the literature that you found, because the gap in the literature is what justifies the research question. Is there anybody here who can tell me what is a gap in the literature in their own words? And if you don't want to tell me abstractly, you could give me an example. Either one is fine.
Can I teach?
Go ahead.
A gap in literature would be anything that would be any contradiction, anything what hasn't been explored yet. Basically, something what's not known yet, that hasn't been any research done on yet.
Yes. The truth is, it doesn't have to be something where there's no research done. It doesn't have to be something where there's no research done, but if there's no research done, that would definitely be a gap. Anybody wants to add to what he's saying? Because everything that you say is right. I guess as people coming in, but I'm trying to see how I can get. Let me go back. I guess right now I'm the only person. Let me try and make this Whitaker make co-host. No, I don't want to make Anna Kay the co-host. No. Nobody wants to.
Can I try teach?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Gap is like is that clear?
I did. You're breaking up, at least on my end.
Okay, let me repeat. I'm saying that a gap is like
sorry, is it me?
a solution to a problem that particular way.
I'm actually not hearing you. I'm going to suggest that you write it in the chat, because I only heard like about a tenth of what you said. What's that? Is there anybody else who wants to either type in the chat or speak so that we can hear? Oh, we have a long pause. Pregnant pause. But let me see if I can do it, which, Ms. Whitaker, can you kindly, I can't be talking and letting people in the room at the same time. Ms. Whitaker, can you kindly let the people in the room? It's just
I am
difficult.
driving, but I'll see. I'll try.
But I thought Philip was going to be here, but I don't see him anymore.
Okay. I'm driving.
I don't know if I want to be making a student a co-host. But at any rate, let me go back and be admitting people then, because I guess people who are coming, the people who are coming for the 4 o'clock, it's now 4 o'clock.
Miss,
I don't see Mr. Smith here anymore.
I'm admitted. I'm pausing. I'm trying. I'm trying to do that.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
I admitted some.
All right, let me just close back and go back to the okay. Right. So let me just so welcome for those who are coming. We started at 3:30 because there was some confusion as to the start time. So I'm just going over the presentation that was done 2 weeks ago. And I just know we're just talking about the gap in the literature. And I was saying that in a literature review, you're going to be having, oh, here's Philip coming back. So he left. Let me try to make him a co-host. So I guess he did not hear that we were, let's see if I can find him and make him a co-host. Yes, good. Mr. Smith, we've actually been meeting since 3:30, you know. Anyway, I'm asking you to kindly be letting in students into the room as the co-host so I can focus on the presentation. Mr. Smith, are you hearing?
Okay, no problem.
I'm doing some of that, Miss Muir, but
all right, no problem. All right, so what I was saying, guys, is that a lit review varies in what it does, but it always is an attempt at reviewing important literature in a project, right? And when you're doing that, you are going to organize it. There are different ways to organize it, and I generally prefer by theme. There are other ways to organize it, and each of the themes would have subtopics. At the end, you have a summary, and I was saying earlier that an important component of the summary is what is the gap. And I was saying, what's a gap? A gap is typically something that is either there's not very much research on the area, or there is research, but there could be conflicts among that research. So maybe 3 studies say one thing, 3 studies say something different. There is some reason why more needs to be known on that topic. So something about that particular topic, there's a justification for more formal research to be done on the area. And academics call that a gap in the literature. And what they mean is a gap in the scholarly literature, right? You're always supposed to put in a gap. So you shouldn't have left research methods class without knowing that that is one of the goals of the review. So its 2 primary goals of the review is to show that you know something about the area, right? And to find at least 1 or more gaps, and those gaps should be tied to your research question. There should be a relationship between not just a lit review, but the gap and your research question. And that could be something we could talk about at length. Anyway, and then you definitely want to have a reference list. And let's go back to this so I can go forward. Right. And then there are different types of research gaps. We don't have time to go through all of that right now. And this is a definition of different types of research gaps. And as I was saying before, the methods and procedures include the research design, the sampling, the data collection instruments, the procedures, the ethical consideration, the methodological limitations, the timeline, and budget if that's relevant for your project. So Charles Gettering said, research means that you don't know, but you're willing to find out. So, and then we had a number of articles. Like these are YouTube videos that I personally think that were good. So YouTube videos about writing research papers, references about systematic reviews. You remember a systematic review is a very good paper that helps you to understand what is up to date. Well, a systematic review looks at all the literature on a topic up to the time that the person wrote it. So it tends to be a good introduction to a particular area. So this is stuff about different systematic reviews. This is about finding the gap. Like I had that slideshow. The picture earlier was on Miles 2017. There is a reference there for ethics for online survey design, online data sources, etc. So how to do oral presentations, things about APA, etc. So there's a lot of stuff here that you could look at. So we're going to go to our other slideshow that I prepared. Okay, so here we go for today. Yes. All right, for today, getting started. So for those who came in at about 4, there was some miscommunication. So I thought that we were starting at 3, but at 3, we basically had, at 3:10, we had less than 10 students. And so we decided to put it off till 4, but at about 3:35, I decided to go ahead and present what was presented last time. So I just did it in just over 40 minutes. So since this is being streamed live on YouTube, if you are interested in watching the replay, you can watch it. I'm going to go ahead with the slide that I prepared for this week. All right, so my intention today is to look at the value of research and development as undergraduate, quick overview of major project, look at the example using social robots to identify research topics, how to choose a research topic. We're going to discuss your proposals and written ideas and talk about what's going to happen at our next training session. So, since this is an academic writing session, I decided to look up what has been written about research and development as an undergrad. Actually, there are lots of papers, guys. And so, for example, there is a paper written in 2010, and in the abstract, this is an extract from the abstract. Engaging students in authentic scientific research has become an important component of undergraduate science educations at many institutions. Research indicates that undergraduates tend to demonstrate gains. And by the way, I took out the part that said it's actually mixed. Analysis suggests that program coordinators and research mentors should consider the length of experiences, engagements of students in epistemically demanding practices, and incorporation of explicit instructional supports. So, what is my takeaway from that abstract is that research shows that students like you who are doing a capstone project like this one should, the length matters. So if I read a little bit of this paper, it shows that if it's too short, the students don't gain very much for it. So, well, we have one here, which is, I would say, about the minimum for it to get big gains. They say students should be engaged in demanding practices. I think we can easily ask students who were in a major project last year and previous years that is demanding. So that can actually help people leave with positive experiences, as in gains, readiness for further academic work in the future, and explicit instructional supports. Now, the reason why we're having these trainings like this is to make sure that everybody knows what is required. So what I've found is that the more of these trainings we have, more people are clear as to what's expected. So we're trying to work on what this says. And then here's another paper. So this was published in 2015 by Lin et al. Called Undergraduate Research Experiences, Impacts and Opportunities, published in Science. And they say, for any undergraduate contemplating a career in scientific research, participating in authentic research seems like a good opportunity. But what are authentic research experiences? How do they benefit undergraduates? What forms of mentoring are successful? What needs improvement? How can these experiences meet the needs of interested students, but at the same time be cost-effective in large research universities? We review the research tackling these questions and find few answers. While most undergraduates give high ratings to research experiences, specific benefits have not been documented. Of the 60 empirical studies published in the last 5 years, only 4 directly measured gains in research capabilities or conceptual understandings. Most studies draw conclusions from self-report surveys or interviews, notoriously poor methods for documenting impact. These studies leave us with few insights into what works and little idea about how to make the experience more effective. Now I have a question for any of you students. That last paragraph indicates a gap. What is the gap or gaps that is presented about undergraduate research experiences in this abstract? Because it's actually abstract. It's as they call it a structured abstract. When you look at this paper, they actually have 3 different versions of the abstract, which is just really interesting. And in fact, this one I would call the plain English abstract. It's the easiest to understand. So can anybody tell me what's a gap? As in, this paper before told us that basically research and development for undergraduate students has positive impacts. And then they came up with some recommendations. These were the 3 recommendations. The length is important, engaging students in demanding practice is important, and having good instruction is important. That's their recommendations. This particular second paper that we're showing says a number of things, a number of big, I would call them research questions, really good questions. And then in the second paragraph of the structured abstract, they tell us about 60 empirical studies. Since it's on the screen, can anybody tell me? Let me look and see if it's in the chat. Let me see what's in the chat, see if anybody has answered it. So I see what's in the chat right now is
Benefits have not been documented.
the benefits have not been what?
Documented.
So the
Right.
undocumented benefits.
Okay. Yes, but I would say even more than that. Yes, so that's one. So one gap is that even though people have been claiming that there are benefits, because even the one before said there are benefits, they're not documented. But I would give you like a passing grade for that, but not an A. So yes, you're on the right track. What else do they say about the gap? In fact, I'll give a hint to everybody.
Most of the studies weren't properly done. They were
Yes.
using poor methods.
Exactly. So there's a methodological gap. So there's a gap in terms of just the content. I don't know the right term for that, but there's not enough information as to what really are the gains. But in particular, when they are measuring gains, they're saying that the methods that are used to measure those gains are not good. As in they're, to use my term, not robust. That's what academics use, not robust. Everybody following me? So I'm not going to spend any more time on that. All I'm just saying is, guess what? There's already research that shows that the kind of thing that you're doing has value, but as of 2015, there could be more research on it, and there's gaps in that.
So is
When
that
you
a
move on-
gap? The methods, is that a gap or is that like a shortcoming?
No, it's a gap. There are different types of gaps, and it's a methodological gap.
Okay.
It's not just a shortcut. So at the end of it, good research should be valid and reliable, right? And if it's not valid and reliable, that's a gap. Because can you imagine, let's just get out of computing and think, give me any disease you want, not COVID. Tell me a disease, guys. Give me a disease, quick.
Cancer.
Cancer. Okay, so some family member or yourself gets cancer. And people did a whole heap of research. And they tested it in rats, but never in humans. Do you think there's a methodological gap there? Never tested in human and then selling it even cheap, selling it to you for $500. Even if it's cheap Jamaica. I would want to argue that that's a major methodological gap. So by the way, for those who don't know, there's a whole testing for pharmaceutical products. First you do animal testing, then they go to healthy humans, then they go to sick humans. There's this whole protocol they go through, and all of those things should all be following a methodology that works. So every project, you can have many kinds of gaps. Of a methodological gap can be one. And if you were in my class when I lectured last semester, I would have said, for example, one example of a methodological gap is in another field, they started doing something called natural experiments in some sciences. And I don't want to get into all of that, but people got a Nobel Prize because they came up with this new scientific method of testing something that the method before was actually pretty good, but they found an even better method to test a particular way in a scientific discipline. So, but yes, the method is very important. Not just a shortcoming. Would you all agree, given my example? Who here wants to be taking a cancer medication based on testing of rats only? Any show of hands? Moving on. Does that make sense, guys? So, this is just basically back to what we did for the last half an hour. So the major project, you have a proposal, you apply it to your supervisor, you draft your chapters 1 to 3, you submit an ethics application to the FENC, as in the Faculty of Engineering and Computing application committee. There is a mini viva in early January before a panel. You revise your chapters 1 to 3, you do your data collection after ethics approval, you do your chapters 4 to 5, you do a final viva before the panel, and you submit your final documentation. And there are 3 types of projects: research and mini development, research only, and research and major development. And I think I should talk a little bit more about this, since somebody at the beginning of our session was asking about this. Somebody said there's gaps in the COVID thing. Oh, definitely. There are lots of gaps related to COVID because research it's just a new disease. Things are still being done. But I mean, cancer is definitely on most of cancer is definitely a disease that people know little about. So that's why I said this tech. This slideshow will be available on both the Moodle. This on the previous slideshow will be available both on the Moodle platform, and Mr. Smith will put together a Google Classroom and we will upload it on there. At any rate, right now, this is currently being streamed on YouTube, so you'll be able to rewatch this if you're interested. But yes, you can get the slideshow as well. So let me just talk about the types of projects. So the majority of projects are research and mini development. So a research and mini development is a project where students have both a research project. Remember, we just talked about chapters 1 to 5, and part of the project includes development of an artifact, which is typically a software prototype, right? So if you take last year, one of the projects with the best grades for presentation was looking at using the social robot that UTech owns, and looking at using to see whether that social robot could be utilized at the UTech Medical Center to interact with patients when they came into the medical center. So in order to reduce the interaction with the nurse, the robot would at least be able to take the patient's, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was temperature and I don't remember all the things that it was taking, but it was definitely temperature and something else. I don't remember what, but it was able to take some health measurements and then send that to the nurse so that they would have less interaction with the patients. You know, obviously the idea is to reduce the likelihood that the health staff who would could get COVID from the patients. Now that's a research. They actually did a research on mini development. So they built a prototype that worked and collected a lot of data. They went literally over to the medical center, interviewed the nurses that are on staff. I think they also talked to, I'm not sure how many doctors, and also found out from students who visited the medical center if they were willing to use a social robot. So they did research and they also developed a prototype that would interact with the patient. That's an example of research and development. Research only project, as its name implies, there is no development. So you would have a research question and you would need to have a robust project that answers that. And certainly at a very minimum, the research only project must employ sophisticated analytical methods. So really, if a research only project is not sophisticated in the analysis and the write-up, the scope is not sufficient for a 3-credit course. So a research only project should only be approved by a supervisor and the group if the scope is sufficient for a 3-credit course. But basically, like you learned in research methods, it's a project that there is some problem or opportunity. There is one or more real research questions that addresses a gap in the literature or a problem in society, and you are seeking in a systematic way to answer those questions using the methods that you outlined. Typically, it would be some kind of instruments like surveys, interviews, and the like. Typically, a research-only project would may have, if it doesn't have more than one instrument, it would typically have some very sophisticated advanced statistical methods or advanced qualitative analytical methods. And research and major development is where you do, as it says, a major development. So the guides of there's a grading scheme for research and development, research only, research and major development that can be made available to you. And if you look at the grading scheme, you will see that the major development is expecting a lot. It's expecting documentation and a long list of things which I've not forgotten right now. But it's essentially, it's like software engineering, but you also have a research component. That would be my simplest way of describing it. Let's see, can I advance the screen right? So I was looking to see, Miss Jackson, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. So say for instance that we go do a research only project, does that impact the type of research that we do, like quantitative or qualitative, or it doesn't matter?
Well, if you want, I don't know how to answer that the way you asked it. So let me back up.
Okay.
I will tell everybody the same thing I've been telling everybody for a long time. I strongly suggest that SCIT students do either quantitative only or multiple methods, meaning both quantitative and qualitative, but not qualitative only, because there is a bias in SCIT against qualitative only projects. So, and that is even, I tell to people, there's a caveat that if you have a supervisor with a PhD who has published qualitative projects, yes, go ahead. What I'm back to, I'm just being very honest. There's a bias. So listen to it's just advice. We don't have to follow it. So advice, not rule. My advice is don't do a qualitative only project. That's my advice. That's my advice. But to answer the question now, whether it's research only or not doesn't affect the research design. So one aspect of research design is whether it's qualitative, quantitative, multiple, or mixed methods. That's not the important. How do you determine, after you determine a research question, how do you get to the methods? It's really two things, very simply. One is you look to see what other people have done in the past, because most likely you're not the first person doing projects like this. So you look to see what methods have been used in the past, and typically you either duplicate those methods or modify those methods. And I mean, that takes a long discussion here. But the other thing, you can be influenced by what is called your epistemological approach to life. I mean, for real now, you know. So your philosophy actually affects how you, as a well-thinking person, as in two really well-thinking persons, can choose different methods and not be wrong, because your actual philosophy depends on the methods. So I know you're undergraduate students and I don't want to complicate methods, but at the end of it, there are more than one method for the same project that is good, but there are lots of methods that are horrible. So even though there's perhaps more than one possible method for a project, why are people trying to enter the device calling themselves iPhone? Anyway, I guess you guys can let that person in, but the people should rename themselves. Person coming in calling themselves iPhone. When you come to my class like that, Mr. iPhone or Miss iPhone, please rename yourself to a real name. Anyway, right. So my short answer is, really, it's a matter of, do you understand what is the relevance of quantitative versus qualitative? Is if you go back, we didn't spend a lot of time in research class about it. Quantitative projects is a framework of you discover things that are already there. It's a positivist mindset, whereas qualitative is really a mindset that says that the world can be shaped by the researcher. I know this is really it's a broad concept. I am of the personal viewpoint that real life is affected by both qualitative and quantitative, and where possible, I would love to include both. But I actually know in real life, many projects, it's not realistic to incorporate both qualitative and quantitative. But let's take in a typical skit project. So even the one I just said, I just mentioned a project where a group was looking at a social robot and did a little interface design for people going over to the health center to use a robot before they saw the nurse. In addition to it was really a multiple methods project, because they interviewed the nurses, they did a online survey of the student patients or prospective patients, and they could have, in addition to that, decided to actually do some kind of user interface test, and that most likely would have been a qualitative project as well. But the point is, why would you do all of those things? Because it's most efficient to get to a lot of students to do a survey, whereas the entire health staff in the health center is less than 10. If you're doing that, it's not appropriate to do a survey, because the literature shows you. When you look at literature, you know that once it's a small number, you never do quantitative projects. It's just not suitable. So I'm saying it's a combination of looking at what the literature says and your philosophical mindset. What I'm trying to tell you is, as undergraduate students, guided by your supervisor, you focus mostly on what the literature says, unless you can argue why you're going to go against what the literature says. And by the way, no, you can actually argue again. So you can say, the literature says X, Y, and Z, or maybe this literature says this, these 3 articles say this, these other 2 says this, and we have decided to go with what is not conventional for these reasons. I don't know if you like that answer. Not a simplistic answer, but it is what it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, miss. Sorry,
Okay,
yes, dear.
wonderful. Right. So I was saying, I'm going to give an example now. So since we only have half an hour till 5 o'clock, I don't want to spend too much time on it right now, but I looked up 2 days ago some articles on social robotics. So for those who don't know, a social robot is a robot that interacts with people. I don't know if I said a really good definition. And at Skit, we actually have a social robot that does, among other things, it also dances. So I said, okay, let me see what's known about this. And I found that there's an article, a systematic review of 10 years of research on human interaction with social robots, another systematic review about attitudes, anxiety, acceptance, and trust. What I found out from this last one is that basically people, on the whole, are willing to accept social robots. And for the second one, I found out that there's many different areas in which there is research in social robots, including education, health, and a long list of things which I have memorized. And then, just an example, 2 years ago, there was a conference where students participated in the design and development of a social robot. The point is, there is research going on social robots, and I was thinking to spend some time, but I'm gonna only go back to this depending on how people go with question and answer. What I wanted to say is, given this area, because I could have actually opened the articles and looked at it a little bit, what could be possible research project that we could do with social robots? Because we have a social robot right here at UTech. What are possibilities? But right now, I'm just going to leave it as an open-ended question because I thought I'd be here at about maybe 4 o'clock or 3:45, not at 4:30 or 4:35. All right, so I'm going to move on. Choosing your research topic. So you're going to look at the academic staff. You can either select from the list that they propose. It seems that this date, some students have gone directly to staff who have their own topics. But at the moment, we don't have a comprehensive list of topics from staff. So it seems that at this time, many of you are going to need to either be proposing your topic or to be going to the staff with your own topic. So just reminding, what are the criteria for deciding what's a good topic? It could be relevant to society. It should obviously be feasible. It could include your personal research interests. You could think about, does it have an impact on your career and your resumes or CV? And will you get support from supervision? So remember, your support is not just your direct supervisor. It could be anybody in academia. I can think of last semester, there was a particular group. That group went to not just their supervisor, they went to several people, including myself, who was not the supervisor. They found a student who won a prize the previous year in academic presentations, and they got help from her. So in choosing a topic, you want to think about all these things. Is the project important? Will you be able to finish it? As in, do you have access to data? So by the way, many projects, if it's going to be on hacking or at banks, you may have a problem getting data. Because banks going to say, who are you? No, run away. Is it going to be something that you can actually get resources to do it? So I know a particular supervisor they purchased something and took them months of it, so they were actually behind in their project. You have to think about whether you can actually do it in a time. Think about, are you going to find something that, if it's not your personal interest, you can put up with for the whole of the academic year? And if it's not your research interest, could it help your career? And will you find support in doing the project? So what I want to spend the rest of the time, apart from just general open questions, is reviewing your proposals and written ideas. But what I'm finding out from students, I've met with a couple, and from supervisors, is that people are, like, for example, a particular supervisor told me last night on the phone that he's been approached by several groups and agreed to supervise one, but that his comment was, and most of these groups are jokers. They have no idea what they want to do. They have nothing written. They have nothing. So I'm not sure what is going on, but want to know, how can we help? And here's how I want to manage this process right now. If it is that you want to discuss your specific proposal or written idea in this meeting, I would like you to put it in the chat. Because if it is that you just want to say, here's my topic, what I think, that's not going to work so well. Because if you understand how research works, it really works on what is written. Right. So go. Anybody questions either about your topics or anything of what I've talked about so far? Hello. So what, nobody has any questions or concerns?
Oh, question. Could you go over the difference between the type of major project, like with mini development and major development? What exactly is the difference between the mini development and major development?
Mr. Smith, can you help me with that? Before Mr. Smith, I would ask him to say that. What I would say to all of you is, if you're going to the development project, you don't need to decide at this time definitively if it's mini or major development, because you will be allowed to switch the project from mini to major development midstream. But I'm going to ask either Mrs. Whitaker or Mr. Smith to help define the difference for me, or describe the difference.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hi. All right, so I'm driving, but I'm trying. All right, so with a major development, right? What you're doing is that you're developing, you're gonna do your analysis. It's like all that you learn in software engineering 1 and software engineering 2, to include all documentations and a project that is a system that can be implemented and used when it is finished. Versus the mini development, you can just do like a working prototype, and you don't have all of the back end. So for the mini, that's the mini development. So you have like a list of requirements, you design everything, you implement like some of the basic or the core of the project, and have like a minimum viable product. So for the mini, that you have a minimum viable product, but with the major, it is fully developed.
Oh,
Get
okay,
it?
thank
See
you.
the difference?
I see.
Right. So everything in SE1 and SE2 for major to include all documentation. Whereas the other one, you can have just a minimum viable product. Like a prototype, basically.
Thank you, Ms. Whitaker. And it's
Right.
and to add to what you just said, it is the major development is a fully viable project plus the documentation. So it's everything. Let's see if this is a question. Okay. So Brittany said, let me look and see. These must be questions. So, okay. So Brittany says, the effects of data analytics on the marketing of products to ensure high volume of sales for your businesses. The effect of data analytics on the marketing of products. But the first thing I would say, Brittany, as about your proposed title, is that it seems a bit broad, and I wonder if you have a research question. So the effects of data analytics. So I don't know. So I'm going to guess here that you're saying that data analytics. I don't understand. Are you doing a prediction? What's that? Gemily, I don't understand your question.
Oh, Miss, I was asking Brittany if she's trying to do a prediction of the sales.
Yeah, I think that's the direction in which you were going. So we have theories, hypotheses, that is.
Yeah, man, but it's so broad right now. What are yield businesses?
I know.
I'm not sure what are yield businesses. I know what a business is, but you say marketing of products. Sorry, that's every industry. Look what you have here. Products that's what you're going to be looking at. every industry in the world?
No, miss.
Right. So yeah, something the scope is too
So, miss,
broad.
we originally did narrowed it down a little bit because they wanted to do it in tourism.
Mhm.
And based on what the yield businesses are, which is people who are generally not making a lot of profits,
Mhm.
I was thinking of using craft businesses.
So hold on.
You
Craft
think about the
businesses.
data.
So hold on,
Yeah,
but if
we weren't.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand if a business is just at the borderline of what's it called again? Just at break even point.
Mhm.
Is it make sense to invest in what is the cost return impact of data analytics on businesses that are not making much money?
Makes sense.
So I have a question. So my first question is, is there background that people have been using data analytic tools for yield businesses? I don't know. You see, that's
don't know.
why without a background, that's why back to remember, if you were here from the beginning, I said that's why you need to actually have a background and a problem statement, because I'm not sure what the problem is. I'm hearing you right now. I'm hearing you say that yield businesses are they're defined as ones that are just barely making profit, and apparently maybe you want to use data analytics so that they can improve their, whether it's their sale volume or their profits. I'm not sure which or both. I don't know, but right now I would start with, you need to write up your problem statement and your research questions, because it could be a wonderful project, but I don't have enough information to tell you I have any idea what to recommend, because I don't know much.
So
if only we're going with Brittany.
Yes, ma'am. So here what our thesis, our hypothesis, or companies will be able to understand each customer through the use of data analytics in product marketing, which can
Wait, read this again.
Companies may better understand each customer through the use of data analytics in product marketing, which can make it simpler and more successful.
That's not a hypothesis. That's a statement.
It's a how
that's not a hypothesis. A hypothesis is, wow.
This one, miss. Businesses that have experienced data analytics approaches have shown a gain in sales on businesses.
Yeah, that's a hypothesis.
Low use and don't. Yes, miss.
The first one, whatever that is, that's not a, it sounds like an interesting sentence, but it's not a hypothesis. Read the second one again.
So businesses that have experienced data analytics approaches have shown a gain in sales on businesses that usually have low yields than those that have no experience.
All right. The only thing is that's a really long, kind of clumsy, but it's my biggest thing with my biggest suggestion is that you transform that into a research question and figure out which business or businesses you're looking at, because you can't look at all businesses in the world. Not only have to figure out the scope, like you could marry it to Jamaica, but even if you marry it to Jamaica, you still can be looking at manufacturing and craft and tourism and.
I know, miss. They were planning to go to tourism, and I was thinking, concerning tourism, they usually have high volumes of sales and unlikely for them to have a low yield businesses. So that's where the tricky part was, trying to figure out a specific business in tourism that will fall in that category, and then to find data on it as well.
Yeah, but here's my biggest suggestion. I so much to you, Mr. Boy. My biggest suggestion to you right now is you and your entire group, because you have a group, right? Yes, you and your group need to read on what's the topic now? You guys need to read about I'm presuming you already know about data analytics in this topic, but you need to read about how data analytics is used in marketing. Right, so maybe you could look up, which I could show you right now. You could look up, like, are there systematic reviews on data analytics and marketing? You could look up. I'm not sure why you're going with yield businesses, but what you need to do is find papers and review the abstracts, then decide which of those papers are relevant so you can frame a problem. Because until you frame the problem clearly, then you know what the research question is. And right now, I'm not sure what the gap is. I'm only guessing what your gaps are.
I see.
So I think you need to do some, but what my suggestion, strong suggestion, is to do some reading. Have you done any reading of literature?
On the data analytics businesses,
The analytics in marketing?
we did, but it wasn't focused on tourism. Originally, we had a different topic, but
and what did you find? What are the gaps? What is known? What is not known?
I don't remember, Miss.
Oh, right. So, but the point is, you need to take notes and you need to know what is known and not known. That's what the whole point of what we'll teach you how to do.
Oh, okay.
Ah, yeah. So you need to do that. And so whether it's in this kind of form or you do it with your proposed supervisor or whatever, that's what needs to happen. I'm going to leave everyone for a little while. There is somebody else with a question. Hopefully that interaction has some value. I hope.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Shamar actually wrote, can cybersecurity be the topic? Cybersecurity is a broad area that's not a topic. It's a, I would say it's a broad subdiscipline or discipline of computing. So I have no idea what your topic or title is going to be, but cybersecurity is not even, you have not even, or you said you have an area of interest. So Mr. Boyne and your group, Mr. Boyne, I presume you have a group? Mr. Boyne? Mr. Boyne's not answering me either in the chat or otherwise. So I'm assuming that Mr. Boyne has a group and they're looking at cybersecurity. They have to figure out which part of cybersecurity you want to look at.
Can you hear me now? My apologies.
Yeah, I
you
can hear you now.
Okay, I'm saying is that the aspect of cybersecurity we're focusing on is awareness. But I don't want to
What do
reveal
you
too
mean
much.
awareness? So let me let's back up. Do you know that in academia, and that's where the context we are right now, there are fancy terms for everything.
Okay.
So is cybersecurity awareness, that's the academic term? Really? Let me look. Let me look right now and see.
Okay. All right.
Are you going to see my screen? This is Google Scholar, cybersecurity. See, this is what I mean. This is half a million results. And let me see, say awareness. So maybe that is the, so you want to look at cybersecurity awareness. So what about cybersecurity awareness?
Basically,
are you interested in?
Without reading too much, basically we wanted to focus on a way to allow the populace and maybe major industries or companies being more aware of different attacks in lifetime or be able to be readily monitored online so as to inform them and the populace about it. So as ransomware attacks or certain various attacks that occur on the internet will be less.
So hold on, let me slow you down because you didn't give me a title. So apparently cybersecurity awareness is apparently is actually the term. So are you interested as a group in cybersecurity awareness among companies or among the general public, or is it both, or is it users? I'm not sure.
The thing is that, Miss, because most of the persons are targeted ransomware are normally companies like small business and also large industries, large industrial companies. The aim was to basically start with educating them, but have a directory or something that would then be able to be accessed by the public, so they can also be more vigilant online.
I'm sorry, what has framed your approach?
Could you repeat that question?
What has framed your approach?
What do you mean by that?
You meaning exactly that. You are saying that I think what you really mean is that the biggest impact is on businesses, because I know cybersecurity affects everybody at every level, but perhaps the biggest impact is on businesses. I think you're correct on that claim. But then you went on to say that you want to, apparently in the project, you want to actually educate businesses. That's part of the project, or you want to find out their level of awareness? I don't know which one.
Basically, we would have the mini design thing, or the prototype would be something that.
Answer my question. Do you want to educate, or do you want to find out the level of awareness? It's a straight question. Answer my question.
Well, I want to do both.
You're having a scope problem, sir. Because then I heard you also say, then you also want to educate the public. And what I'm asking you is, so you want to find out what's the level of
Awareness within the,
awareness among businesses with cybersecurity, and you want to educate them, and you want to also make that educational tool be available to the public at large. And I said to you, what approach in the literature has given you this framework, like, and saying, yes, other people have been doing this, and so yes, my framework is grounded in this literature.
I
In
really
other words,
don't-
what have you read on this to come up with this?
what have
That,
I read
yes,
on-
this is in line. This is
Oh.
in line with
Oh.
what people have been doing.
Okay, so what have we what we've looked at before is the fact that major we had a project to do in a previous course, computer security related, and we saw a very like few cases where companies would publicly let it be known when they were attacked by ransomware in the Caribbean, and so there's not much literature or not much information on companies within the Caribbean or in our hemisphere that publicly let it be known
Right,
when
so
they
that's a gap, but you're not listening to me, you know. I'm hearing you, so I know there's a gap. I'm not even,
Okay.
I'm not concerned about the gap, so you're telling me that there's a gap in our context,
Yes.
Jamaica or the Caribbean. What I'm asking you, you're telling me a 3-part approach, and I'm saying, which paper have you read that has followed that approach? And so
Oh,
you're
no.
being guided by that approach.
But at the moment that has followed that approach.
And that's what I'm saying to you, you need to do some reading. Because what it seems to me that you have articulated that there's a gap,
Yes,
but
miss.
you have proposed an approach, and just even though cybersecurity is not my area, it sounds like too many things for one project. Usually people are either looking, and if you're going to look at both the level of awareness and education, you don't do it in 2 groups, because those groups are going to be very different. What the public at large is concerned with and what large businesses are concerned with, and if it's larger, whatever. I don't know what kind of business you're talking about. It's usually very different.
There was another idea, miss, where could it be better to then
Sorry, are you understand what I'm saying?
yes, I understand what you're saying, miss. I need to focus on
Okay.
the limit the scope or not be as general as I've been articulating on the discussion. But I'm saying, miss, is it better to take approach and whereby
By the way, I've actually always met before, and I tell you all the time the same thing. My name is not that. I will just for the rest of the session, please call me Teach. I don't like this. MISS is not in my name anywhere. Nowhere on my birth certificate is that. So please call me Teach. I'll be much happy with that. This or call me nothing. I'm good. Just you've been using the word MISS 10, 20 times since you've been talking. Amazing. Mhm.
So is it better to then focus on the scope of shedding light on
What you
awareness?
need to do is you need to read. So I Google and I see systematic review of approaches assessing cybersecurity. Have you read the systematic reviews on it? So if I go like this person, so if I go here and I go to systematic review, remember I just told you I'm not an expert on this area.
Okay, miss.
You look it up. And so
Sure.
here, there are all these systematic reviews on cybersecurity and education. I would start to read it. Have you read them? The
Not
first
yet.
thing, if I was doing this project, I was look at this. Look at it. This is a recent article, assist of multimedia tools. I don't know what else I'm going to look at here. So I would start to look through and see what, and since you specifically wanted about businesses, you wanted about business. I'm going to put in business based on what you just told me. So I don't know, see, there is cybersecurity risk management in thing, but I don't know what is here. You actually have to spend time looking through the articles to see, because there's even gamification of cybersecurity. Look at this, multimedia tools, gamification. There's going to be different articles on it. The
Thank you, miss.
context of industrial, just to ask me, who is not a cybersecurity awareness or even cybersecurity expert, about what's the best approach, you need to read.
All right, understood.
That's why I was asking you what was informing your approach. So my humble suggestion is that you need to think about, and then you have another challenge because you're looking at cybersecurity. So you need to find a lecturer who is an expert in cybersecurity. So that would include the people who teach security. So those would be the people who you'd be approaching as potential supervisors.
Thank you.
But I'm not sure if I can give, I mean, we could spend more time on it. That's why I could spend more time on the other one, but I don't think you've actually read about this. So until you start to read, I have nothing to say to you. Go and read about it. See the whole paper there. And I told you to read the abstract first, and I didn't read the whole paper, read the abstract and find out what is going on. They have all these wonderful papers, and they're recent about this very topic that you said you have interest in.
The thing is that I haven't read any academic papers, but I try to keep
And
them.
that's what you need to do. So what you need to do is that this is an academic class. Read the
Yes.
academic papers. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
That's my feedback. And Demar Brown says you mentioned that banks might be difficult to get the data from. Are there any other institutions we probably should avoid or have trouble getting ethics approval for? I can't tell us off the top. The only two that I know off the top is with banking, it can be challenging depending on the nature of the banking project. I didn't say you can't do any banking project. I'm just making a general comment. And I know there are people in the past have had interest in looking at hacking. And just think about it, guys. Which hacker is going to be willing for you to interview them? Those are the two I know about. There are others that it's really about getting enough lead time. So if you want to go in health, for example, you might need permission from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, depending on the nature of the project. It's not, you can't do the project. It's just a matter of you need lead time to get ethics approval. It's really all about it's really all about getting the project done early, because remember now, even when that there's not a difficulty getting the information on, you're going to have challenges just getting the permissions from companies. Yes, we want to go in and talk to people. If you're not going to do that at a university, you need lead time to make sure that you get in. If none of you who work within that organization, there needs to be some formal request to do, interact with the staff or people there. So let me go to somebody else. Anna K says deployment of an attendance monitoring system to collect and store student information. Anna K, that sounds to me like a software engineering project. I don't know what's the research component. I don't know what's the research there. Anna K, would you like to
Yes,
speak?
it's our software we are planning to develop.
Yes, but what's the research? If you want to do a project that is even major research and major development, there needs to be a research component. So I'm asking you, what is the research question?
Miss, we haven't come up with that as yet. I just want to get your feedback.
Yeah, but
on the
I
type.
can't get feedback on a title, That's what I'm trying to, let me go back again. Did I hear you? Like somebody at the beginning of the entire session said, is the research question a title alone? So I would say, at a minimum, you need a title and a research question. As a max, what's the research question? I can't give you feedback. I don't know what the research question is. So let me start to brainstorm in my mind what could be a research question. So maybe we might want to find out if an attendance monitoring system would lead to increased student attendance, or maybe would lead to greater efficiency in collection of that data. I don't know what you want to do. I have no idea what the problem is. I literally don't even know what students this is. Is it high school, university? I don't know. So without any background, you're asking me about something I don't know what to think. So Anna K, you need a title and a tentative research question. Without that, I don't know what information to give you. You understand why I'm saying that? Anna K?
Yes, Miss, I do.
Good. So are you able to say it now, or are you going to go back and think about it?
Miss, go back and think about it, Miss, and then move on from there.
Right. So Jemily says start with the problem statement. I agree. Start with the problem statement. You can start with the research questions too.
Yes,
I
Miss.
won't even say start with the title. No, the title is the least. The title is not the most important thing. You can get to the title last. I mean, yeah, you can
Yes,
have a
Miss,
working
but
title. But really what you actually need is, here's a problem. Here are our research questions. Or here are our research questions. Let me try to write up the problem. Remember, the audio right, it doesn't matter, but it just needs to be a project that makes sense at the end of it. So let me see what Natasha is saying. So Natasha has the implementation of a facial identification system using computer vision with deep learning and facial recognition biometrics as a crime prediction and mitigation strategy for the crime hotspots of Kingston and Montego Bay. Wow, that's a mouthful. We need a shorter title, but let's see now. So she wants to implement a facial identification system using computer vision with deep learning and facial recognition biometrics as a crime prediction. Okay, so in other words, this is obviously research and development, whether it's mini or major, I don't know. So they want to use facial identification systems to mitigate crime hotspots in our urban areas in Jamaica. Clearly it's relevant to society. And I'm going to assume that the people who are doing this project is because they're also interested. So I think it checks boxes for the things about, yeah, the panel will be like, yes, if you do it well, they'll be like, yes, definitely relevant. Crime is one of Jamaica's biggest problems. Yeah. So check as far as that project idea, potentially great. The question I have is the title way too long. So you need to fix it. But that's the least. I'm not worrying about the title being too long. Now back to my question is, what exactly is the research question? So, and my concern is that you don't overscope the project, because you said the implementation. And are you in one academic year, which is basically about 9 months, going to be able to develop a prototype or a full-fledged thing that will actually be able to mitigate crime? So remember, mitigate crime would actually be that you can actually measure that crime has changed for the better, as in gone down. In 9 months, that's unlikely. So I think perhaps what you want to do is develop I'm only suggesting. I'm not sure what you want to do, but this project looks too much for a 1 year in my first looking at it. Because my question would be, will the research question be, is this facial ID system, is it effective? And can you actually build this identification system and determine whether it's, that is effective in 9 months? I don't think so. I'm not saying I'm not trying to dish you guys enough. I'm saying what is actually realistic. It's more likely that you can actually build a great prototype and see if there is acceptance and interest in people using it. I don't know. So you have to think about coming up with research question or questions that the scope is not too large for the period. Natasha, you see where I'm going? Natasha, are you hearing me? Hello? Oh, she has it down here. Natasha says, would the use of facial identification system by law enforcement officers improve their ability to prevent and reduce the rate of offenses such as illegal gun possession, theft, and kidnapping by criminal elements? So, Natasha, I think that's actually a brilliant research question, but I think that's of a large project that would be good maybe for a master's or a PhD. Like, seriously. I actually think this is a brilliant project, well worth doing, very important for Jamaica and the wider society at large. I would give the project idea A+. And by the way, since a particular person was saying that whatever, nobody else don't take Natasha Group's project idea from them. But I think you have to be careful, because I don't know if you can answer that question unless there's already an existing facial identification system that you can actually just implement and tweak in Jamaica. You're going to probably need to have a different question than the one that you have written here, is my 2 cents. Anil says it's a great idea, it's been used in developed countries. Well, we're at past 5 o'clock. Hopefully This has been helpful. Anybody with any other burning question? Because otherwise I'm going to close it. Just to let you know, the plan for the next meeting is to have the ethics chair share, as well as what would I have? I think I have something else done that it will continue going through basically the preparation for major projects. Any other burning question, guys? Because we're beyond the time meeting. My time was supposed to be 3 to 5, and we end up starting at 3:30. Mr. Smith, Ms. Whitaker, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here. As I said earlier.
Any suggestions or comments?
Well, not right now. For those who came on late.
Okay, I'm still here, but I'm also still driving.
Okay, all right, no problem. When is the next meeting? According to the initial plan, which might change. Let me go back to, hold on. I'm going to stop share and look at the, can I even find this thing back? All right, so I'm going to go back to the initial plan. So according to the initial plan, yes, here. So the plan has October 6th. Share screen. All right, so this was the plan from the beginning. So just for those who came in late, where is the dates? I want to go back to the other dates. All right, so just remind everybody that essentially at this point, you should be working on a proposal. You can reach out to different people, even people who are not your supervisor. If they're willing to give you feedback, you can do that. So you should be working at getting a draft and your chapters 1 to 3. Basically, the idea is that this semester is getting your ethics application, your chapters 1 to 3, and preparing for the mini viva, which will happen in January. Thursday, January 5th is the date. If you're people who are working full-time, please put that on your calendar. You are working towards getting the prototype and chapter 4 finished by the end of March. Obviously, chapter 5 will be by April, and the final viva, which is an oral presentation to a panel, will be on May 18th, unless we change it. And you will submit to your supervisor. Grades will be submitted by supervisors by June 15th. And we'll be having paper and poster competitions. And we had the September 7th and 22 training. The next one is scheduled for October 6th. Let's see. I could show back. The grade schemes will be placed. On the major project. As you know, the major project on Moodle, as well as on a Google Classroom that Mr. Smith will be sharing with students. And I guess at this point we'll be sharing it, since it's not put together yet, we'll be sharing it through the SkitRep. So you can contact Mr. Smith or the SkitRep to get that link. At any rate, I don't think you're I'm just laughing because somebody's telling me they didn't like how I dealt with them. Everything's all relative. It's all about what it's all perception. It's all perception. I don't know who here has not known. There's certain words I prefer to be called. I don't mean it anyway, guys. Right. So just for anybody who came in late, I keep seeing people coming in late. Just reminding you that there are some grading requirements. Let me just show you again in case you missed it. The grading is here. Don't know where is it? I seem to have missed it. It's in here somewhere. Okay, here it is. Just a reminder that the overall grade, which is really the only thing that is pressing right now, the overall grade is your proposal is 5% of your overall project mark. There's a content assessment for 15%. Chapters 1 to 5 is 50%, and the Viva grades together are 30%. That's the grading scheme. And we actually only have a grading scheme for the Viva. We don't actually have a grading scheme that's right down for chapters 1 to 5. And the Viva is so far away. So the first Viva is in January. So it's a bit early for looking at the Viva, but yeah, you can get access to the grading scheme for the Viva. I can't send any document in the chat. I don't have access to that right now. Going to be, I'm not at work. I don't have that on this computer I'm at. I can't send any document in the chat. Sorry about that. Certainly we're going to put everything online. Guys, the most important thing right now, in case you're not getting the feedback, the most important thing right now is to get a project and a supervisor. That's the most important thing. That's what's important. So the fact is that most people are still trying to find groups and are maybe not most, maybe apparently 80% of people have found groups, but most people don't have a topic, don't have a supervisor. That's what's pressing. That's much more pressing than the grading scheme for mini versus major project. Not you can't look at that, but that's not actually affecting you going forward even in the next 2 months. So I think we need to focus. I mean, that means you can't have access to those things, but what is really important right now is to understand what is major project. It is both a written and an oral examination of an entire empirical study that includes 5 chapters. Chapter 1, introduction. Chapter 2, literature review. Chapter 3, methods. Chapter 4, analysis. Chapter 5, conclusions and recommendations. And most groups will do a prototype. If you're going to do a research on your project, it must be robust enough to be counted as a 3-credit course. And you can interact with the 3 who are in this meeting, Mr. Smith, Ms. Whitaker, and myself, to get feedback on your project. There's actually a wider committee that can help you. And I'll give you that list of those names. And it's just to make progress along that line. That is what is the most important right now. And so the last, so I just went through the basic rules and the big framework. And the rest of it is to understand now, here is myself and my group. It's typically 3 to 5 people, and we cannot have more than 6, so 6 is not allowed. So 5, 4, 3. And some exceptional cases will allow 2, but that is only in case of some great emergency. So 3, 4, 5 people. You need to be forming groups, working on your projects, finding a supervisor. So the key is that everybody understand that and be working on that. That is what is critical. Am I making sense?
Yes, miss.
Teach.
Okay. Yes.
The last meeting, it was said that a list of lecturers will be provided in terms of who you could select as supervisors.
Or is that select?
Is that still happening?
I mean contact.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Miss Whitaker is working on the list. The problem is 2 problems. So problem 1 is we would typically have a list of topics that supervisors had actually given. And at this point, very few supervisors have actually given us a list of the topics that they want to work on. So typically what we'd actually be given is two things. It's really here, mostly what we'd actually give is just a list of here are the topics that supervisor proposed. And at this point, we don't have that list. So we're not trying to be difficult. But on the other hand, yes, you can get a list of all the academic staff that work in the school. Ms. Whitaker, can you tell us how you're going to share that with students? Are you still there? Hello? Oh, she's not there? But my understanding, because we've broken up the task, my understanding is that Ms. Whitaker would put it on a Moodle platform and Mr. Smith would put it on a Google Classroom, and that at this point, since we don't have it right here to give you right now, you could wait for that list. But let me see, how can I even say that? I guess that is an urgent matter. That's one urgent matter. Mr. Smith? Hello? Is he here? I'm going to stop sharing.